are going live. Looks like we should be live. Let me double check.
It says on air everywhere.
Yes, I am. I'm on air. I'm famous.
Yeah, well, it says that here, but let's see.
It says one viewer. To the one person watching, hello. That might be one of us, so it's just counting this. But
yeah, I just
not
loaded.
hello.
Cool, we're good.
Cool.
So, welcome. Where does it say one viewer?
On the top left, it says live. Then one viewer.
Yeah, that's right.
We get a little
We
eyeball.
got someone on.
Mhm.
Welcome, one person. This is a show just for you. This
the
is
After Call.
the Function Call show. It's a fun show about web development, programming, and stuff.
And friendship.
And
course,
friendship. Yeah,
friendship.
I think I
Always
might be
friendship.
changing that tagline.
Programming's better with friendship.
It is. Maybe we'll keep it. You may have convinced me. But yeah, we're doing a little bit of a pre-show. This is a podcast and a live stream. So we get on this live stream to record the podcast, which means that we have a little bit of time before the show starts to chat with all of you. Oh, they left.
Yeah, I was about to say the one person's gone. How
Later.
sad.
That might be a
They didn't want the friendship.
note for
They were not they're not a fan of the friendship.
let's see. Yeah, I guess no one's on, so no worries. But yeah, I guess what I was saying, if anyone is on and for some reason it's not telling us properly, this is a live show that we use to record a podcast. So if you want to chat with us before the show, now's your chance. Feel free to hit us up in the chat. If you want, you can hang out till after the show and we can answer any questions there as well. And we might get to some of your questions during the show. And with that, I think we can get started, yeah?
Let's do it.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Function Call, or as Grant likes to call it,
The effing call.
that's right, the effing call. We got a good show coming up today. On the show, we got a full cast, 133% showing up. We've got myself, Austin Gil. We've got Grant giving me some funky eyebrows.
Gliding
Give me
into those
funky
DMs.
eyebrows. Gliding all over your DMs.
I'm stealing your
we've-
power.
we've got Mr. A and J, AJ Zane, zaning up things.
With Jake and Bacon.
And on the show today, as a special guest, we've got Ben Katz, gracing
Hello.
us with his presence from San Francisco.
That's right. I'm up in San Francisco.
Awesome.
Coming on the show today.
So, were all of your other arrangements canceled or what?
Absolutely. My other arrangements in terms of like playing rock, paper, scissors in the mirror, because like what else do you do in quarantine? Like,
Have you ever won or lost that game?
Oh, I mean, I always win. Always.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, by the way, but
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but you always lose too in that case.
it's true. Should keep that in mind next time.
Yeah.
I don't know. My favorite
So-
game in quarantine is figuring out what AJ actually means.
Yeah, Ben, you want to take a shot at? We've been guessing what the A and J stand for.
Ooh.
Um,
I'm gonna go with a journeyman.
A journeyman.
That's right.
A journeyman.
So, AJ, did your parents name you a
A
journeyman? Zane?
That is not exact, but that's warmer.
It's close. Okay.
Ooh.
Grant, write that down. We'll have to keep that in the notes for later.
I'm going with automatic justice.
You already got
Oh, that's awesome. That's a good one.
Okay, I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna guess that AJ put out a series of conspiracy theories because his name is Alex Jones.
Ooh.
Oh, fuck.
Are you Alex?
kind of looks like him, just a little bit.
All right. You got to put the suit
I've never
on,
seen.
though.
I've never seen you and quote unquote Alex Jones in the same room at the same time. So I'm pretty sure I saw it. Yeah. Right.
No.
No.
Let's give a
That
I
just
mean-
gets a flat no.
flat
Yeah.
no.
I mean, it's all right if we guessed it and
No.
you're trying to. No? Okay. All right. Well, anyway.
We're gonna add those to the list and
Done.
cross them all off because
Yeah, I know. Grant's got a big board of like red yarn connecting a bunch of pictures together in his basement. Just
Shit.
like,
you can't
there
see
you
that
go.
at this angle. Like how?
There you go, Grant. You can add another yarn to the board.
We zoomed into the map in your background, and we know.
Okay, so yeah, today on the show we have a special guest because we are going to be talking about interviewing. So today's show is the interview on interviews with Ben Katz.
Woohoo.
Ben, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Ben. I work as an engineer at DoorDash up in San Francisco. Previously, I was at a small healthcare startup in San Diego where I met AJ. Free time, like motorcycles, like watches, like whiskey. I think that's about it.
Wait, what was that?
What
I
do you
said
wear
Your
today?
free time.
In my free time, yeah.
Gotcha.
Austin doesn't understand the concept of free time.
Exactly.
Free as
What watch
in
are you wearing
Google.
today? No,
What's that? Sorry.
I said what watch are you wearing today?
Oh, gotcha. Actually, not wearing one today, but usually I wear like a mechanical watch by Orient.
Okay.
And I like Omegas a lot too, but I don't own one because I'm not willing to spend $10,000 quite yet. Maybe someday.
Yeah. A buddy of mine has the moon watch, the Speedmaster, whatever that is.
Oh yeah, Speedmaster. It's a nice one. It's
Very nice.
I mean, Moon Watch because it was the first watch in the moon, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
What is the most innovative thing that has happened to watches since the calculator watch? Oh yeah, I guess the Apple Watch.
I was about to say an Apple Watch or like one of these. I mean, I think the beautiful thing about watches is that they're so it's like a Rube Goldberg-esque sort of thing where they've overbuilt them to the point where they have like a million different gears that are all turning based off of the Earth's gravity. And it's just a super cool thing to watch if you ever get a watch with like a case back that's open. But see what I did there?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just an interesting thing. I think it's like a throwback to a different time. That's what I like about it.
Yeah. And what's really cool is like the hobby now is so accessible because there's like really good movements coming out of China and Japan that are not $10,000 insane pieces.
100%.
Right? And,
I was
and
gonna say we're talking about accessible, like the accessibleness of watches, and you just like following a $10,000 watch comment.
well, because they're not $10,000. They're,
Gotcha,
a few
gotcha.
hundred in certain cases, right? Where
Yeah.
like you can get something that is built to a high level of precision that's highly complex. Like these things are weighted with jewels.
Right?
Yeah.
Jewels,
That
I
is-
say.
They have sapphires usually or something like that. It's like
Yeah, sapphire glass, and then like rubies for specific like gears and cogs and stuff. Like so, deep in my family history, we were watchmakers. So like I know something about this stuff, but only enough to reveal how much of an idiot I am to like people who really know this. So like, yeah, watches, cool stuff. Good job.
Thank you.
Truly a timeless hobby.
Oh God, you are the worst.
Puns.
All right, so with that first pun out of the way, I think we can get into the show. Otherwise, this is just going to turn into a show about watches. So yeah, today we're talking about interviewing.
I would
and
watch that. I'm ashamed of myself.
This is
Should
a
be.
podcast. No one's going to watch it.
Hey, there's one viewer. One person at least is watching this.
If you have someone on the live show, that's great. Cool. So where do we want to get started? I think a good place to get started is to look back at like how each of us got started in our careers.
Sure.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So I actually started programming many, many years ago. Both my parents were software engineers, so when I was growing up, they were always writing various programs to keep me entertained by flashing random colors on the screen and things like that. So I kind of grew up around various programs being written, and at some point I asked my dad to teach me. He was like, "Nah, I'm too busy." So what I actually ended up doing was go. That's not completely true. He taught me some things, but he was working all day. I had to figure some of this stuff out on my own. So there's a kid at lunch that basically said, "Okay, I have this internship." This was in high school, and he was bragging about it every day. And I basically just laid into him for about 2 months until he finally, passed my resume along to his boss. Ended up being a Department of Defense contract, which was pretty interesting for a first job. So that's sort of how I got my start. I just right place, right time, and persistence, which I think applies regardless of what stage your career is at, right? You just have to keep at it, and eventually somebody will open the door for you.
How old were you when you got that first job?
I was 17. That was in programming. If you want my first actual job, it was like scooping ice cream when I was 16 or something. But.
Right. No, I'm just thinking how many 17-year-olds are responsible for Department of Defense software.
Yeah, it was it was unusual for sure. I think the first project was it was like a tool that was basically being used to track terrorists. It was a sort of a timeline view, so you could see like what a person was doing at a given day and time. And you could plot these different things on the chart, and then some generals would come in and like use this program, and we gave some demos to them. It was pretty cool.
What, dude? I just make websites. Cool. What are you talking about?
Hey, that was all web development too. It was just it was kind of an interesting form of web development. I'll say that.
Yeah. That sounds like really intense. Cool.
It was for a first job, certainly. I had no idea what I was doing. I remember the interview, the guy that interviewed me was like, "So do you know how to program?" And I was like, "Sorta." And he's like, "Do you have transportation?" I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "Okay, you're hired." And I sort of got thrown into into this project. And yeah, it was web development actually. It was very like primitive. Like jQuery had pretty much just came out. It was like 2008 or 2007 at the time, and everything was pretty manual. There weren't that many like nice frameworks or anything to work with. Wait,
you just said the jQuery had come out.
Yeah, it had just come out, but I mean like in terms of like nice libraries to plot things on a chart or something, there wasn't much there, so we took right along on our own.
I'm so tempted to take that bait, but I'm just not going to bite.
Ben, you got to learn something about this show is you don't take my comments too seriously.
Yeah, I didn't.
It's like, okay, yeah, that's all right. All right. Cool. Who wants to go next?
I can. We can look at the exact opposite end of that spectrum. So I started self-learning programming when I was like 34, 33. I had a career as like a substance abuse counselor for my entire life before that. And like just saw the writing on the wall. It wasn't sustainable. I couldn't support my family with this. So I'm like, all right, I can do this thing. And my first job I got by going to these meetups called San Diego JavaScript. So I live in San Diego, SDJS, full of nice folks, a couple of weirdos, but generally like some nice folks going to this place. And they have this practice at a lot of their meetups where they have you raise your hand if you're looking for a job, have you raise your hand if you're looking to hire somebody and trying to connect people and get them jobs. And so my first job, I worked literally for dog treats, helping to build a website for a place that sold dog treats. So this is what they had to pay me, and I needed the experience. And I continued to roll that forward. And, you know, I think if you can handle working for free, it's not bad to get experience, but the industry is also like rife with abuse in that same way. So it's a tough call to make. But yeah, it's that basically wraps it for my first job. No defense contracts, no tracking terrorists, just dog treats.
Hey, that's pretty cool. Still, dog treats are awesome.
And mine's similar, kind of like we talked about during the first episode. I had this pretty multimedia background, and at the time, I just needed a job desperately. I lived in a small city, so I had spent a lot of money at the time for me to print my resume on cardstock paper, and I would take my bike and go down into the downtown of the little city and just pass my resume out to pretty much every single company that would somehow let me in or that I could break into to get to the front desk. And eventually that became a bunch of web projects that I got to add to my portfolio and grow the portfolio until the projects became bigger and bigger.
That's such a good way.
I don't suggest that.
No, but it's such a like go-getter approach. And also like going from small projects and bigger. That's pretty cool. I got started in web development. Let's see. I did a career transition. I have a background in I had studied kinesiology. I was going on the path to like physical therapy, and then I learned web development and fell in love with it and decided that's what I wanted to do. So I taught myself as quickly as I could, as much as I could, and then I went on Craigslist and I found a company that was looking for a web developer, and I reached out to them and I was like, hey, I am not qualified for this position, but I'll work for free as long as you train me. And that pretty much got me in the door. And that's like some of the best advice I can give early stage developers looking for that first job, because I didn't get paid right away, but eventually they didn't hire anyone, and I knew that they had a budget for someone. So eventually I just asked them to start getting money, please. And that was pretty much the interview process. Like, you'll work for free? Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's do it. Yeah. So has anyone had any like stories from the interviewee side of things that we want to jump into now?
I think it'd be really cool to hear from Ben around how you got to DoorDash, and I'm sure we're probably going to be interested in that.
Sure. So this was back in 2018. Actually, I had a previous position that ended somewhat early. I mean, I ended up quitting, so it's not like it ended, but I decided that I was kind of done with that a little bit earlier than I thought I would be done, and decided to start interviewing. Went through a huge process. This was the case in 2018. I'm sure it's the case now. Applied to about 100, 200 different positions. Many of them didn't pan out, but the ones that did, I generally had referrals at. So I'll say referrals are super important. So I had a referral at DoorDash. I had a referral at another company in New York City, and I ended up interviewing at all these different places. In terms of DoorDash specifically, I had a friend who was a manager there, so he kind of put a good word in for me. And the way it worked there is they took a look at my resume. They sent over a take-home project. So I did the take-home project. It was pretty reasonable. It was, if anyone's ever gone on, Lead Code once in a while, the first problem on there is best time to buy and sell stock. So that was the problem I worked on at the time, and I don't think they even asked that anymore, so I'm probably safe saying that. But but yeah, I did the project. Somebody reviewed it and left some code review comments. When that was good, they brought me in for an on-site. I ended up preparing a lot for the on-site. That's generally something I would recommend to other people, is don't take these things lightly. A lot of these companies are taking the hardest questions off of any of these standard interview prep sites and asking them. And the topics will typically be, recursion, trees, graphs, lists, So really like know your basic data structures and know how to apply them. Like what is the right time complexity for any algorithms you're writing during the interview and things like that. All super important. So, most of the on-site interviews were like that. There were some other ones as well. So I did a system design interview, which is kind of interesting. That's actually my favorite one because it's mainly around your past experience. You kind of go up to the board and someone says, I want you to design a system that does X, right? And they just sort of leave it there. You go and ask some questions about that. So you might ask, what are the requirements of the system? How many people might be using it? What are the users like? What are the functional and non-functional requirements, basically? And you kind of get to draw that on the board. So, that was one interview. We also did a engineering values interview, which is basically a personality screen. So this is where they figure out if you're, easy enough to work with. So some advice for interviews like this is, I would say, just be a friendly person. Don't talk bad about old companies and, standard stuff that, should probably be common sense, but I still do interview some people that come in and just completely spend the whole time bad mouthing, and that's like not a good thing to do. So I got through all those interviews, and then I heard back the very next day, got the offer, moved all my stuff up to San Francisco, and here I am. But the whole process was long. It took several months of applying to different companies and just absolutely grinding with these interview problems because it's fairly standardized across different companies. For better or for worse, you kind of just have to know the algorithms and the data structures to pass these kind of interviews. So yeah, that's sort of the advice I would give. Just take the preparation seriously, make sure you're a nice person, and have a referral if you can get one.
Yeah, I think that paints like this really interesting picture of what kind of higher level job interview processes look like, where it's not like this, we met at a meetup and shook hands and we went and had a conversation and then they hired me, right? Like I think there's a lot of stories like that in the entry level where the requirements are very, very different. But when you start getting into mid-level and senior level engineering positions, the companies are far less willing to take risk. And so their interview process is typically designed around never creating a false positive, all kinds of false negatives. So qualified candidates get eliminated very early in these things, which is like part of the frustration that we'll talk about later in the show. But almost nobody makes it through who isn't actually qualified. And so like people hearing that process are like, whoa, it was like several interviews and lots of like kind of going back and forth. And it actually kind of caught me off guard. You said that you had done a take home or done a coding test and they commented and let you iterate. That sounds unique. Normally they'll comment and like say, we'll never talk to you again.
Right. Yeah. The process.
Right.
Yeah, it is kind of unique. I mean, a lot of places will just outright reject you and not tell you why. The process I'm working on with my current team right now actually sort of mirrors that as well, where it's more of a back and forth dialogue between the interviewer and the interviewee. Over Slack, you get a spec. There's a meeting to discuss something about the spec, clarify things, and then a PR gets submitted. It's supposed to represent the real world, which I think is not a perfect way to do things, but better at least.
Yeah. This will be interesting because at some point in this conversation, you have been on both sides of the discussion for the process, right? So interviewee, interviewer. So it's interesting to see from both sides, like what you've seen, what are some stories or anecdotes or like advice for the interviewer and also the interviewee, and like getting a callback or things like that. So it'll be cool to get into both sides of that.
Sure.
But yeah, does anyone have any tips on getting your getting a call or getting reached out to from companies as an interviewee?
I have a tip on what not to do. Don't spend all your time talking to recruiters, because they, in my experience, my personal experience, have been not super useful. I've never, so I've interviewed places through recruiters. I've never interviewed at a place that I actually wanted to work, and I've never gotten a job through a recruiter. Every job that I've had, I've gotten through my internal network, people that I know, people that I've like met and made connections with at like conferences or through friends of friends. Like, that seems to me like a really reliable way of doing this. But I also know what it's like when you're totally outside the industry. You don't know anybody who does this. That seems impossible, because like, you don't know anybody. Like when I started this like a few years ago, I literally didn't know anybody. And you know, the one person that I would go to like get advice on programming stuff worked at a level where like he can't hook me up with like an entry level position. Like, that's ridiculous. So, you know, that seems like an impossible hurdle. Maybe we should, you know, we're talking about how to get a call. Maybe we kind of covered our first jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
How have you heard other people get first jobs, I guess?
I think it is really hard if you haven't, especially if you haven't come from a traditional background. Like, my first network was really just the people that I took classes with in college. And so that really helped out. It's just, you know, talking to other people that were going through the same thing and had maybe interviewed before me, and just having them put it in a word for me. Or, you know, it's definitely a lot more difficult if you're out there on your own. You've never been in the industry before. And to some extent, you know, there are a lot of boot camps out there that are potentially like not so good. There are others that are actually quite reasonable, and those are like some places where you can go and you know, find other people that are learning about this thing. And some of them will have opportunities to get you a job, or they have some sort of connection with local employers. So that could be like one way to go.
I don't think it matters if you're just starting your career or well into it. Networking is super important. And Grant, I think it's interesting because I view recruiters as another extension of your network. And like, they don't know you personally, so they can't talk about that side, but they're really good at reviewing resumes and portfolios and your LinkedIn profile, which unfortunately we have to keep updated. But you know, most of the times, like most of the people that I've worked with knew someone at the company or someone who knew someone at the company, you know, and that's how they got in, and then kind of proved their worth, then got their foot in the door, and then kept growing with the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like networking, excuse me, super important. I mean, like the initial part of that is the hardest hurdle to get over, is like building the initial network. Once you have that, it's just sort of natural after that, because you meet like coworkers, and then those people move on to other jobs, and then if you've talked to them, they'll generally refer you, and it becomes easier as you get into it. But yeah, definitely starting out, you have to make more of an effort.
Yeah, I'll jump on that as well. Is networking is super good. I think that, like to your point, Ben, it's way easier to get in somewhere if someone has referred you, because a lot of the time it's not about technical skill. Like a lot of positions you need to meet some sort of level of technical skill, but that's a lot of the stuff that you can learn or be taught. But just being someone that's easy to get along with, communicative, I don't know, nice,
yeah,
friendly.
I would also say like the referral helps even if you know you've gone through an interview process and maybe you didn't do as well on one or two rounds. I've seen that where sometimes if the referral is really, really strong and the person's well respected, they might overlook some of this feedback because you know that background is just so strong that they figure that, you know, the interview might have been a fluke, and they're willing to trust the person's referral to some extent. I'm not saying like you can't prepare and you can just like rely on the referral entirely, because if you bomb all the interviews, nobody's going to hire you. But if you it gives you more opportunities to make a few more mistakes than average if you're just a random person coming off the street, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As an interviewer,
Yeah.
I'm looking at, I don't want just a code monkey, right? They might be the best coder ever, but if I can't sit down in a meeting with them and not want to pull my hair off, like, that's going to be a problem, you know? Like, they need to have that kind of other skills and aspects to them.
For sure, that's something I listen for as well. It's like, how are they responding to any particular questions I ask them, or if I try to poke holes in their solution, are they immediately defensive, or things like this? These are like subtle things I sort of watch out for as an interviewer, because you have to be able to have a beer with the person you work with, or whatever drink of choice, or just hang out, But that's something that's super important, because there's going to be times during the real job when you're on occasion at least working crazy hours, or there's a important project you have to get done, and you have to be able to work with people under stressful situations like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be able to have lunch with these people. You wouldn't want to like hire a vegan.
Whoa.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dang,
communication
AJ.
style is one of those things where, like, I think we do not interview for communication style and ability enough. And when somebody is in a project that is large and they're required to interact with multiple teams, that's a skill to me that is just as important as their ability to kind of problem solve with code. Where we've hired people who that is their primary skill, and the rest of it, and AJ, I think you mentioned this, you can be taught, right? Like, they maybe haven't worked in our stack, but they're likable, motivated, willing to learn, and have shown an ability to learn. That's it, right? Like, that's enough in, I think, a lot of cases to get somebody up and going on a project.
Yeah, especially if it's like the bar changes depending on the level of experience the person's bringing, right? So if it's an entry-level person, I'd probably be more inclined to take someone with less experience that shows an ability to learn things than, versus a senior person might be expected to know a few more things and be able to hit the ground running. But I think for sure there's not enough investment in people's ability to learn and sort of get themselves up to speed. Like, there's always opportunity to mentor people when they start the job, right? So.
Yeah, that's always been interesting to me, that, like, specifically in this industry, like, we're very tied to somebody with a deep history, right? Like, we very much want somebody at the senior level to have 10, 12 years experience plus, but that experience, so there have been multiple studies in other disciplines. Let's take medicine, for example, where increased length of experience is highly correlated with misdiagnosis, right? So, like, I think that this translates well into a conversation about like HR requirements for a lot of positions. Like, everybody talks about the entry-level position where you need 2+ years of experience or whatever, right? And I remember, like, reading those job ads and being like, 2+ years of experience seems ridiculous to me for an entry-level job. Like, if I can't get this job, how am I supposed to get this job?
Or some of those postings that say, you need 15 years of Kubernetes experience. Meanwhile, Kubernetes was invented like 5 years ago or something. One of those.
Yeah, we see a lot of those in React land as well. Like, this is relatively new, and that kind of goes back to my previous point of in a, we'll say, bleeding edge industry, does experience matter that much? And I would argue in some cases, yes. In like large enterprise environments, yeah, I think it starts to matter a bit more. But for most cases, I would argue that experience matters less than aptitude.
I think I agree with that.
How do you measure aptitude? Like, So I don't know. One of the problems I have with interview processes is kind of like what Ben has mentioned, is when you go through some that are so grueling that you have to go through some like screening process where you're lucky just to get through, and then you have to do some sort of take-home assessment that takes 20 hours, and then you have to take a whole day off of work to go and interview for 8 hours with 5 different teams, whatever. Like, it's a lot. And
Wait, you're supposed to take the day off? Like, you don't
Yeah,
just
no,
do
exactly.
both?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've been through those, and they're freaking rough. And so, like, even if after all of that they still can't measure aptitude entirely, because I think even with that, I don't know if I would be able to say confidently, like, yes, this person is more apt than that person or whatever. Some people interview bad, and frankly, I think some interview processes are not good practices, things that I, as an interviewer, I don't want to put someone else through.
Mhm.
So if I can't measure aptitude entirely, then I have to rely on something else that I can say this person has spent this much time in the industry, working in these fields, building applications that look like this, so I can assume that there's certain levels of aptitude in front end development or networking or database administration or whatever.
To some extent, I wonder how much some sort of like certification exam would help. Like, this is sort of a solved problem in like mechanical engineering or any other field of engineering where you have to take a PE exam in order to practice, right? Maybe something similar for software would be useful, just to avoid all this extra, extra interviewing that may or may not be necessary with these full day processes. I don't know how hard it is to specifically build a test around that, but maybe some sort of just standardized entry bar kind of thing. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but basically some sort of test.
Yeah. I mean, and they have this in other kind of digital domains as well. I mean, for networking, and there are a lot of people who self-educate in these same domains, right? I think there are some in cybersecurity as well. I'm unsure. But I know like MCSE exists, A+ exists. Like there are certifying bodies. But also I want to say, like, coming from an industry that is ruled by certifying bodies, they're disgustingly corrupt and essentially just like money vacuums when it comes down to it.
We have like AWS, but there's also like our industry changes so fast that by the time that you have something planned out and sorted, it's like, cool, this, I don't know.
Yeah, like, how do I certify a React engineer when
exactly, like,
the library's been around for 7 years and it's changed drastically in that 7 years?
Or if you're an Angular shop and you have a grade 100 percentile React engineer coming in, they're going to be able to switch over real easy, but you've got to be certs.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And I hear a call for that pretty often, right? Like, this is a solved problem in other industries. So the thing with like electrical and mechanical engineering and even in my previous field in medicine, like, those don't change quite as rapidly. They do change and evolve.
Sure.
Thank God they do, because wow, there's some esoteric shit going on and all that. But they don't change anywhere near the pace that our industry changes. So like that is like an added, it's not quite a solved problem. I wish it were. But also that comes along with like this very gatekeepy type of thing where, like, if I'm going to go and get certified, that requires me to have specific resources. It kind of goes in the same category as these like boot camps where I'm going to pay you $10,000-$12,000 and I'm going to come out of this with either some knowledge or some connections to get a job. Like, I don't know if we've had our show about that yet, and I've made my opinions clear, but they are strong. Yeah, that's definitely like an interesting question. I do want to ask the group to kind of maybe move things in a little bit more of a positive direction. What is your favorite interview that you've done that you felt was like effective? Like you were asked a question, or the whole interview process was like really, really good, and you were like, this is nice. Like, what was that like for you? Who has that?
Yeah, I have one. I would say actually my current, the current process I went through to get my current job here it's not my favorite. Some parts of it were great in terms of like the doing a project versus doing a phone screen for 15 minutes where you're expected to do the optimal solution as fast as possible and you can't make any mistakes and that kind of thing. So at least it wasn't that. But no, I mean, I'll say like favorite has probably been at a company in New York that basically just gave me an exercise to do. And that was the whole thing. They basically just sent over the project, said, implement this thing to spec, and we'll get on the phone and talk about how you might scale it. And that's all we did. And it took me about a day total to get through the entire process and had an offer the next day. And I thought that was super reasonable. And, it's very practical in terms of if you can solve the problem, if you can write the code, it was a similar problem to what they were working on at their actual company. So it should be similar to the real world as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I can say I think I have like two favorites. One was I got flown up to Oakland to do an interview process, and it was my favorite because the food was really good. like they like basically they like reimbursed me to go out to eat. They put me up in a hotel, and I was just like, and then like we came in, whatever. The actual interview process was still pretty good. I mean, it was like, I had to do a bunch of rounds with a bunch of people and had like networking and problem solving and all this stuff, and that was the same as any Bay Area company, but the food was good. And then my other favorite that I felt was like effective, or that I felt like I got to show my best side, was also kind of like a take home, like Ben was saying. And I think that's just because, as funny as it is, like I don't think coding is the number one thing to test for in a candidate. And yet this one I felt the best about because it was how I could show like all of the different layers of the things that I care about in my code. But in fact, I didn't show anything about who I am as a person, right? So I don't know.
I will say this, during certain interviews, I have been offered like food and stuff like that. And usually the company will not during COVID anyway, they would pay for you to fly out to wherever the company is, and they'll feed you and all that. I have a hard time like actually eating a lot during interviews. I love food, but if you're telling me I'm going to go through this crazy like 8-hour long process and you're going to like grill me all day, and then I just like can't focus on the food that well for some reason. So I think my last time I did one of those processes, I had like half of a sandwich or something, and then just like powered through the rest of it. But yeah, I don't know what it is about that. It's just something about the stress, I suppose.
So here's a tip for interviewers. If you really want to see how your candidate does under pressure, give them some really gnarly like Mexican food for lunch that just like, is going to tear up their stomach.
You're a jerk.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. Please don't do that.
Turned into like a hot ones
Poison
thing.
your candidates. Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Like, yeah.
Line up
Just hot
chicken
wings.
wings and hot sauce.
That's one of the things that like, and AJ, I want to hear your like favorite interview experience too, but like mine is so clear in my memory because this was my like second or third job in tech, and I get on this call and the guy is like, hey, I'm going to screen share, this is the problem that I'm working on right now. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure, like what's the deal? And he like kind of walks me through like, this is the code and this is what we're trying to do, and it's like this authorization flow, and he's like, I'm getting this weird behavior, what do you think it could be? Or like if you were working on this, like what would your kind of debugging steps be? And I'm like, oh, okay, we're like going to solve your work problems right now.
Yeah, I like that.
And on one hand, I'm like, okay, I don't want to solve your work problems for free. But on the other hand, the level of this role, like this was a very appropriate conversation. And the size of this company, when I got hired there, this is exactly what we did. And I think the closer you can like relate the interview to the day-to-day process of working, which is why, I don't know, maybe eating bad Mexican food every day is like what you do, and you're going to be under that kind of pressure. But I think there's a lot of artificial pressure in interviews, and there was some pressure because, like, you know, I'm trying to get a job, but it was also very realistic in the type of problem solving that we were going to be doing. Whereas, like, I've done lots of interviews where the problem solving has no bearing on the work that I was doing day to day. Like,
That's
was
the
just
worst.
out of this world. I'm like, no. So I interviewed at a place that had me write on a whiteboard HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. On the whole wall is a whiteboard, and they're like, here's your HTML document, here's your CSS document, and here's your and I'm like, I told them up front, I'm like, my inclination is to walk because this is insane, but I'm going to try and do it just to see if I can do it. And I did it. And then I walked, and God, that place is just absurd. I've heard very bad things about this place, and I'm not going to say where it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you, instead of doing that, like, if you're going to ask people to write code in the interview, at least give them a laptop or something, right? Because nobody's writing the code on the whiteboard in the interview.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they would barely accept like pseudocode in there. They're like, are you sure that that's the method that you would use? I'm like, you really need to calm down.
That defeats the purpose of a whiteboard.
Yeah, I don't have IntelliSense in my wrist.
Yeah,
jerks.
I think your whiteboard's broken. Maybe check the Wi-Fi, because the IntelliSense here is. AJ, you got a favorite interview story?
It's very similar, actually, to what Grant just said, and what Ben was saying about getting PR reviews and kind of learning about how does this company actually act day to day, and how am I going to fit in with this company. And I think that the more, as an interviewer, you can make your process kind of emulate the day to day, that's how you're going to find the real people that are going to jive with the company. And so I really like the interviews that start on the culture side before anything else, because, like we've been saying, like, if you don't get along with the people you're going to work with, and you don't get along with the company and where it's going, you're not going to stay very long. And then let's get into your technical chops and figure out, do you have the aptitude to get to the next level? And I really like it when you're getting real problems that people are dealing with, or they give you not a take-home project, but an actual real project they're paying you for, and they're like, let's try it out for if you want a one-off project or a 3-month kind of internship. And then we're like, all right, you can actually do what you're saying you're doing, and then you get hired. I've had that a couple times, and that's really, like, I've noticed a big difference between the companies that focus on that kind of process versus, hey, you have to check off all these leak code answers.
Yeah. But how many companies are going to offer to pay you for the interview process? I've never had that. I mean, it sounds great, but I think, like, certainly at some of these larger companies, that's going to be a lot of people that they're paying, right? Because Google will get like a million inbounds of, like, people that want to work there, and then maybe people are gaming it to just say, like, oh, I'm going to try to do this project and I'm going to completely fail it, but at least I'll get paid, right? So there's some trade-offs there.
Yep, and you get problems with candidates who they're like, I can't do that because I need a job right now. I can't have a job for 3 months and then get fired.
Right.
Yeah.
But I found that the candidates do go through that usually.
Yeah, and I think the paid projects are getting, like, more and more common, and they're late stage, right? They're like, you've passed all the personality stuff. You did mention kind of personality fit. I want to bring this up because it was mentioned that it might be illegal, and I think it probably should be. My wife was interviewing for a job, and she works, like, in a totally different industry, and they were kind of hemming and hawing over whether they were going to give her an offer. Come to find out, so one of the early stage interviews that she did was a personality test, and she failed miserably on the personality test because she's clearly, like, a full-on psychopath. She's, like, one of the sweetest people on the planet. I do not deserve her, but she was deemed like a bad fit. They waived that and hired her anyway. This is one of the most toxic workplaces I have ever witnessed. It was just rampant with all kinds of abuse and like just crazy stuff going on. She thankfully like got another job, moved out, and is now with the company that she's with now, which is like a reasonable workplace. Like the normal day-to-day work miseries exist there, but it's not like a problem.
Thunderdome.
Yeah, but like you kind of mentioned, AJ, a personality test, and that to me is a bit of a red flag, depending on how they go about it, right? Like I think there's
I think you can't come out and like give them a literal personality test.
Yeah, like Myers-Briggs. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what happened? Did they give her like an actual Myers-Briggs test, or like?
No, it was almost. So it's this form.
It was the what is a sandwich?
BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
It's a BuzzFeed personality test. No,
No,
it was.
it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't that.
They're like,
was.
Is a quesadilla a sandwich?
Yeah.
They had hired this like what are those HR people? They had hired this like HR firm to develop this series of questions. And so while it isn't technically a personality test, I saw a lot of the questions on it. I'm very familiar with the Myers-Briggs. It's a personality test. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I think you can get enough just by like reviewing someone's code and going back and forth. Like, you don't really need to ask them anything. You just see how they respond. And like, there are some other things you might want to check, like, tell me about a time where you screwed up, or, one of those standard questions, just to see how they've interacted with other people in the past. But yeah, hopefully no literal personality test. That is crazy.
Always check.
We are running pretty late on this show, and there is one last thing that I want to get to before we close up, and that is we have touched on some of the things that really suck and are broken about the interview process. We've touched on some things that we like about interview processes that we've been a part of. So Ben, if you've thought about this, I know that actually you have been working on this with your team. What are some ways that we can fix the interview process for both parties?
Right. Yeah. So I think, one of the best ways to do it is to take the interview process that I really liked and just do that, basically, which is to, avoid live coding exercises, avoid, these unnecessarily short time limits to churn out code, right? Because in the real world, you end up taking a few days to work on a task usually, or a week or something, or a couple weeks. There's no reason to ask somebody to do that in 30 minutes, right? So the first thing is have a reasonable time frame for the interview. The way I'm doing it with the current process I'm working on is giving the candidate the problem, typically on like a Friday or something like that, so that people don't have to take off work if they don't want to, and then just saying you have a few days to finish this. First step, we'll go and talk over the phone and discuss the requirements. And then there's a Slack channel open if you want to go back and forth while you're building. We can talk about it there. We'll put a PM in the channel if you have product questions. Try to simulate the real world, and then just do the review as you would review any person's code. And I think that's easier on the interviewer as well, because it's a more natural process. You have more time to actually look at what the candidate's doing versus making a snap judgment based off of some code that was written in 5 seconds. And, typically it's easier to sit down, and more effective, I would say, to sit down and spend the time, review each line of code, and sort of make it more like a dialogue, go back and forth.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Anyone else want to have anything to add to that, like things that we can do to improve interview processes?
Just chill, man. It's cool. You want a job? Like, let's do some work.
Yeah. I think something that I would like to see is some way to anonymize the pool of candidates, because I think that just, I don't know, like I believe in sort of working under the assumption of a meritocracy where the most qualified candidates are the ones that you hire. And that can be affected by reading a person's name. You can, you can infer their gender or their racial background or things like that. That even if you don't consider yourself affected by those, like everyone has some level of unconscious bias. So I'd like to see that. There's some cool things that I've seen. Some companies that I've like interviewed with, they're not quite recruiters, but they're like what is it? Like they do all of the technical interview process, and then they're like a middleman between you and the company that's trying to hire, and so they do all of the technical vetting. And once you've gone through their sort of interview process, the other company isn't, or like the company that's hiring isn't allowed to like ask you technical questions. They just want to get a culture fit. So that's been interesting.
Yeah, there's a really cool one. This is for phone screens anyway. It's called interviewing.io. Basically, companies will submit themselves to this website, and basically you as a interviewer can go on. There's a voice changer, so you can set your voice to whatever you want, or you can leave your voice as is. But anyway, the interviewer can't see your resume, can't see anything about your background, and all they have is this live coding terminal, and they ask you a question, and then you respond, and that kind of thing. So I think that's an interesting way to do it for sure. Just to avoid looking at the resume entirely, and just let's see what this person can do. I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, I personally never, I mean, maybe recruiting wouldn't like this very much, but I try not to look at the person's resume as much as possible. I just try to ask a fair problem that I've run into in the real world and see what they think about it.
Yeah. I think my advice for people interviewing candidates is to take half of the resumes you receive and just throw half of them in the bin. And because naturally you wouldn't want someone unlucky on your team.
God, you're the worst. Oh man, you're so bad.
That is...
I was like, is this going to go somewhere reasonable? Okay.
It's Austin talking. It's not.
No. Okay. I think we can end on that. Definitely, just to cover our own ass, like definitely don't do that. That's not very nice.
No, absolutely not. No way.
I mean, it eliminates 50% of your unconscious bias.
So there is a positive to it. You don't hire any unlucky people.
What I like to do is race down a staircase and just take the one that lands on the topmost stair.
There you go.
Now we're just refining the process.
Yeah. Cool. So, Ben, I don't know if you're aware, but at the end of every show, we like to end with a section called shout-outs, where we give a little shout-out to products, people, services, things, animals, whatever. It can be self-promotion. It can be, someone else. It can be your lovely wife, if you have one, or husband, or significant other, or animal. You get you get the idea. So
or animal. All right.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and jump in first. So to give you some time.
Okay, sure.
AJ, you want to go first?
Yes, I will totally start because Grant took a low blow at me for being a vegan, and I am going to suggest Amy's food. They do frozen foods. It's really high quality ingredients. So it's still frozen. I get really busy. I don't have time to make meals all the time or have leftovers. All the stuff gets heated up really quick in a microwave or an oven, and they have a lot of really vegetarian friendly stuff and vegan friendly stuff. It's all delicious.
Yeah, I'll second Amy's. It's good.
You may be shocked to know this. I've purchased some of those frozen burritos by mistake, and they were actually pretty good, man. I was into it.
Go for the Jesus bean burritos. They're phenomenal. Add a little bit of salsa on top.
Speaking of, the Mexican food theme, I'll just go with, I'm not going to shout out anything particular that I'm working on, but I'll say Tacos El Gordo, best Mexican food I've ever had, ever. So amazing tacos. Go eat there.
That's in San Diego, right?
It is in San Diego.
Yeah.
All right, now I have to look it up.
Grant, you got something, or are you busy looking up Tacos El Gordo?
Well, I can multitask. When it comes to tacos, I can always multitask. My shout out is full face helmets. I crashed my mountain bike yesterday, like an idiot, but I was wearing a full face helmet, so I still have teeth in my mouth.
And a chin.
And a chin. Not non-broken jaw happening. It's great.
Nice. 5-star review for no broken jaws. I'm going to pick something related to the topic that we discussed today, and that is a book called Cracking the Coding Interview. I didn't read like a ton of coding interview books the last time I was looking to get hired, but I did read this one, and this one is really good for, I think, for a lot of like, if you're doing, I don't know, there's a lot of weird stuff in it as far as like the algorithms and data structure stuff, but I think they do a good job of covering a lot of different knowledge that you should have going into an interview. So it was good, although I don't think that interview questions should necessarily be about the really weird, obscure, like trivia riddles.
For sure. That's a good one. I think too, if you're going to read that book, also just go on leetcode.com. They have these sort of questions that are sorted by company, by type of question, difficulty. And for most of the companies that unfortunately still ask a lot of these questions, it's a resource that I recommend for studying.
Yeah.
Even if you're not looking at a new job, it's just good practice.
It is.
So Ben, you got a shout out that you're ready to share?
Oh yeah, it was Tacos El Gordo. I already did mine.
Okay.
But
I already looked it up. They have multiple locations throughout San Diego, convenient for your taco eating needs.
yeah, and we were talking earlier about mechanical watches. Those are super cool as well, but not as cool as tacos. I'll say that.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll add a link to Tacos El Gordo in the show notes.
It's funny. One of the pictures on their website of one of their locations has like plastic over the windows.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what's going on, but that's the location to go to for sure.
The one that looks the sketchiest, you should go there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So with that, that's the show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Special thanks to Ben for showing up and giving us anecdotes and tips and advice and stories on interviewing.
Of course.
And if anyone wants to reach you, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, sure. You can just go on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is linkedin.com/BAKATZ91. Or you can go to my website at BAKATZ.com.
Cool. We'll add links in the show notes for that as well. And with that, we'll see you next time.
All right. Are we off? Are we off the air?
Still says live.
All right. We can stop
Stopping.
recording.
Stopping now.
All
And
right.
then we do have one viewer. So special viewer person, if you are interested in chatting with us, this is the end of the show or the post show. Feel free to throw something in the chat. Otherwise, hopefully we'll catch you next time.
I want to know, Ben, is your personal website just full of badass cats? 'Cause that's all I can think of right now.
Is it B8 Cats?
It is BA Cats. It's my initials.
That's awesome.
What can I do?
You could put some badass cats on your
I could.
website.
I could. Maybe I will now, you know. It's a good suggestion.
That does that on like a random day every month.
At least for an April
I was
Fool's joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
got your
just love
contact
to
information, you know, your history, whatever, and cats.
Cats memes, yes.
Yeah.
I just love the idea that someone shows up to that website every month, it's like so disappointed with the content that's there. It's like, oh, again?
It's like isitchristmas.com. And then just that one day. There's cats.
Yeah. All right. We got no love in the chat, so I think we can call it. Thanks again, everyone. And yeah, I guess we'll check in next week.
Yeah. It was nice to meet you, Ben.
Nice to meet you all as well. Well, I already knew most of you, but nice to meet you.
Yeah, good to see you, Ben.
Have a good one. See you all later.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.